the unusual thing about what we're doing is we're streaming video from space. So we have our own 4K video cameras in space, we have our own satellite, and we have cameras on the International Space Station.
That's no mean feat, right? A, getting cameras in space, B, getting permissions to get them up there. I can't imagine the detail, nuance that one has to understand from basic filming to filming in space. I've seen some of the footage. You obviously have an intimate relationship with it. There is something so stunningly calming about watching planet Earth turn. Is what you do art or science? Is it something else? You know, welcome to TEKEX Podcast 2, here with Charles Black, founder of Sen. Firstly, thanks to our partners, PwC, Rathbones, C5 Digital Jersey, who helped to make this happen. If you want to join the TEKEX tribe, email me, ed@tekex.co. Charles, welcome.
Thank you.
TEKEX Podcast 2. Fresh out the gates. Really appreciate you joining us. Before I intro you, we were just walking up here and you cited Bergerac, that's also going to be on stage tonight. This is your first trip to Jersey?
It's my first trip to Jersey, yes. I just remember as a child watching Bergerac and interested to sort of think back and see some of those scenes, and just to be here myself is great. It's, my first hour or two on the island has been very good.
Awesome. Well, and you learned literally 5 minutes ago that Bergerac is coming back. It's making a comeback. And actually, one of the speakers tonight, Bex, is going to be talking about that. So yeah, you'll be able to watch it all over again.
Oh, it'll be fantastic. It'll be great to rewatch or new detective stories now that I've actually been here as well.
Yeah, good man. Right, so you're literally on stage in like an hour or two. Now, from your profile picture, which I think is you gesticulating on stage, are you like well-versed in presenting and in the entrepreneurial space?
I've done a few. I've done conferences and a few events like that, and a few investor events. So always happy. It's part of my job is to get out there and communicate the vision and tell people what we're doing and try and get people on side and excited by what we're doing, whether that's potential people are going to watch what we're doing, invest in what we're doing, and generally I've just got to sort of build up the profile of the business and what we're doing. So that's part of my job, to go to places,
road showing
anywhere in the world and tell the story of what we're doing.
Well, look, we welcome you with open arms in Jersey and Channel Islands. And look, I like to start these things off. I say that like I've done it loads. This is number 2, but I think like a lightning pitch, 1-2 minutes, Sen.com. What's it about? What's it doing? And why are we here? Why are we talking about it?
Sen is a video streaming company, and the unusual thing about what we're doing is we're streaming video from space. So we have our own 4K video cameras in space, we have our own satellite, and we have cameras on the International Space Station, and we're streaming real-time 4K video of Earth and events on the space station, and making that freely accessible to anyone in the world. And the idea is about democratizing space and giving people the opportunity to see Earth in the same way that astronauts do, if you were looking out of the space station window and looking down at Earth. And I just think it's really important to empower humanity to be able to witness planetary change, see the beauty of the planet, see the reality that we exist on a world moving through space. And I think that gives you a perception change and it makes you think differently. And I think it's the first commercial and first 4K live stream that's ever existed. So it's a completely new sort of form of media. But we think, my belief is, and I've had this idea for about 30 odd years, is that there is a mass audience out there that will take comfort and enjoyment from seeing real-time video of Earth from space and seeing the beauty of our planet and seeing Earth in the same way that astronauts do.
It's beautifully mad, and I can like feel the swathes of people watching, like ask him this, but I'm going to do my best to sort of navigate us through that. I mean, that's no mean feat, right? A, getting cameras in space, B, getting permissions to get them up there. I mean, let's delve a bit more into, how did you get there and why did you on this journey? But also, and there's a massive question on how, like, A, what does it take to get cameras up there? But secondly, who the hell do you begin to speak to, and how do you get to those people? So could delve into that.
Oh, great questions. It's been a long journey, really, from when I first came up with the idea, which was 1990, and I just left school, and I was thinking, what business do I want to create? And I thought, I want to create something that's useful and constructive and that can go on, has the best chance of sort of going on for a long time and not being something that's trendy or fashionable, something that's useful for people. And I was also interested in space, and I thought, why don't I create a news channel that tells the story of everything that's happening on Earth, and as humans go beyond Earth and explore the moon and one day Mars, why don't we have video cameras in space that tell that story and create this sort of 24/7 news TV channel that we can broadcast to everyone? And I was really excited when I came up with the idea, but it wasn't the right time to launch it because it was 1990, so it's before the internet, so there was no global distribution platform for video streaming like there is now. There was no smartphones, and space was very much government agencies. So I had to sort of just keep the idea and always think, like, how am I going to do this? And I actually went to university, partly to keep my parents happy, so that I did a law degree. They always said I have to have something to fall back on in case my harebrained schemes didn't work. But even during university, I remember that's when sort of internet started, sort of 92, 93, 94, 95. And that's when I started thinking, right, this is the way to launch a TV channel globally. So rather than having to sort of have a traditional TV station, what about distributing video on the internet? And that's going to be the next big thing. And I actually studied media law as one of my courses, and I wrote a story about this called it's called A Human Right to Broadcast TV Speech. And it was all about how governments shouldn't decide who can broadcast, because the internet would mean anyone could actually put videos online and make them accessible, but regulation should just focus on content, like defamation and so forth.
Yeah, look, we're in the cancel culture, freedom of speech debate live. So you were thinking about that.
I was
way
thinking
ahead of it.
about freedom of speech, really. Just
Yeah.
we have there's a human right to be able to express yourselves, and there's maybe a human right to sort of have the freedom to start a business. So I'm getting a bit sidetracked from the story, but that's sort of how it came about. So I've been thinking about creating Sen for a long time, and then after doing my law degree and qualified as a barrister as well, so trained as a barrister, and I really enjoyed that. It was really useful studying law, and I studied sort of constitutional law and media law and things like that, which have really been really helpful in business. I then started an internet company in my bedroom. Originally it was called Space Internet, again sort of linking to my passion and idea to one day send video cameras into space. And I thought, well, I'll start with making videos and for companies and put corporate websites up and put videos on. And I started getting contracts to build websites, and no one wanted video then because it was sort of dial-up modem days still, so there was no broadband. So I ended up getting more and more websites and hosted websites, and sort of that sort of business turned into a hosting company, which I called Nastar, and I renamed it Nastar because I had Space Internet, but it was space-internet.com, and I couldn't live with the hyphen, so I came up with a new name, which is based on network application servers and hosting, and then the star bit is just, again, had to have a space theme in the name.
Yeah,
so
it works.
So I got nastar.com, and I was running that business until 2014, basically. So started it in 98, launched hosted services in early 2000, 2001 hosted email, then something we called hosted desktop, which is now what we call cloud computing, just anywhere access to your applications and data. Listed that on the London Stock Exchange A market in 2005 so that we could grow through acquisition as well as organically. And just kept building that up. And then by about 2007, I was sort of thinking, I just really want to get on my space business. So I started thinking of a name and a brand for that, and spent about a year thinking about that, and found Sen. And I was looking at an acronym, so that's sort of the idea came from Space Exploration Network. And I bought Sen.com in May 2008. But in the meantime, I was busy focused on making Nasdaq successful because we were quoted. I was the CEO, and that was my first duty to make that successful. So we did some acquisitions and we grew that. And I finally stepped down in 2014 after we'd done a couple of acquisitions. And then I was sort of free to start Sen, really. And then you asked like how you get started. Well, it took me a couple of years to work out the best way to go about it, and it just so happened around that time, well, from 2012 really, companies particularly in the US started to raise money for what's called new space, which is this idea of SpaceX and other companies that commercial companies could actually launch their own satellites and develop rockets, and the trend was that the costs would come down as more companies entered into the market to launch satellites. So I thought, well, that's the way to do it, is to raise some money and hire some engineers and set about developing the technology to stream video from space, which didn't exist off the shelf. So the first decision I made was that.
You mean there's no off-the-shelf space?
No,
video
there wasn't anything
setup
quite off the shelf. So we had to. Well, the choice was either I went to a company and said, "Can you build this for us?" and so forth, or I took on the engineers and did it myself.
And are the engineers part of the space exploration teams? Like,
yeah,
I can't imagine the detail nuance that one has to understand from basic filming to filming in space.
Yeah, it's quite complicated. Getting technology into space, first of all, getting it there is quite hard because you have to pass launch vibrations, so you can't sort of things will fall apart if they're not properly built and bolted together. Then you have to worry about thermal things because you're going from very cold to very hot. You have to worry about radiation, and power, of course, is limited, and so's bandwidth and distribution of data as well. So there's quite a few challenges like that, and of course you need to be able to robotically control things. So you need to be able to update the software on the satellite or the system. You need to be able to command it remotely to start filming, stop filming, to change frame rates, exposure settings, and so forth. Because obviously it's not like having an iPhone in your hand where you can change the settings with a button. So it is quite a challenge, but I've got a brilliant team together. First team started in early 2016, and we set about sort of developing the electronics to stream video from space. And I always wanted it to be high quality, so 4K really is a minimum. And to do live video, we had to be able to compress the video in real time on board the space system, which was a new thing really, because traditionally, and even now, people who take still pictures or other types of imagery do a lot of the processing back on the ground. So it's quite big file sizes on board. Those are downloaded and then post-processed back on the ground and made into useful imagery. Whereas we had to sort of put the processing power into space, so all of that could be done in real time.
I'm hoping in the edit we can edit away to some of your footage as well to sort of complement. But what about the how? Like, who do you need to get to?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you how we got started. I wanted to get as many video cameras into space as possible, and that's still the plan. And there's sort of two ways to do it. One is you have your own satellite, and the other way is you put your own camera system onto someone else's spacecraft, which is known as a hosted payload. And I thought, well, let's do both. The actual electronics, if you like, the computer that we've built to process video in real time and deliver it back is the same, whether it's sort of a hosted system or our own satellite. So I thought we'll pursue both, and we started by developing the hosted payload system because we thought that's going to be lower cost initially than building our own satellite. And we got a contract to build some video cameras for a Russian state-owned company called Energia, who were building a satellite for the state of Egypt. And they wanted 4K video cameras on board the satellite to inspect the satellite, not to look at Earth, but to actually visual verification of commands and deployable structures on the satellite. And they had spent a couple of years trying to find a company in Russia to do it, and no one could do it. And we got introduced to them. I flew out to Moscow and said, yeah, we could do this, no problem. And they said, fantastic. And a process followed of security checks and politics, because we were a UK startup, essentially contracted with the Russian state to put cameras into space. And one of the senior figures at the company was very keen to do this. It was his sort of thing he wanted to get the first 4K video into space. So he championed us, and we got the contract. And then we had I think after getting the contract, we had about 3 months to deliver this system, which we've been sort of developing anyway. So we got those cameras out to Moscow and got them attached to the satellite. And then after about 6 months later, that launched in early 2019. And it worked. So it was...
Put you on the map.
Yeah,
we can do this.
On the map. We can do this. We had steerable cameras with pan and tilt, and we had nice imagery of Earth, and we had sort of delivered the software so that they could control it through their mission control. So we had sort of zero touch of the system, and it wasn't our core business model. Our core business model is as a video streaming company where we own the video and we make money from people watching it as a TV channel and so forth. But this was a way of proving our technology and getting paid to do so. So as a startup, you have to sometimes be flexible and take opportunities as they come. So we thought, well, we're getting paid to basically get our technology into space and prove it. So that's how we sort of got started on that. Then next step was putting our own technology, iterating it, improving it, and putting it into our own satellite, which we did. We didn't build the satellite ourselves, so we contracted with a satellite builder in Europe to build, if you like, the box, which has the batteries and the solar panels and the standard avionics that all satellites have to be able to steer and recharge and deliver power to our computer on board. And that launched in 2022. And that's a tech demo satellite, still in orbit today. And that's also delivering lovely 4K video from 2 different cameras. It's the first satellite that's ever been able to live stream video as it passes over a ground station. So that's just to get the video back, you have to transmit it over a radio, and you have to have receiving ground stations, which are dotted all around Earth in different countries. And we've been able to demonstrate that as well. But that was just, again, a tech demo. So all of this time, it's a case of, I've been fortunate to have some very great investors that have backed the vision, and it's backed the long journey to develop and prove the technology. And then finally, we've now in a nice position where we've actually got a new hosted camera system that's on the space station, which itself was probably a 3-year project from starting it to actually getting the cameras live on the space station. And that is delivering over 20 hours of live video a day, which then means we've got a TV channel, we've got a product, we've got something that people can consume and watch and follow. And most importantly, of course, it means we can generate revenue. So it feels like we've got a business now, having proven the technology.
And am I right in thinking that was through some SpaceX, NASA connections, how that began to get enabled, getting your own satellite up?
Yeah, the satellite was launched by SpaceX, and that was their only role in that, was just doing that, and then the satellite's operated for us by the satellite builder. In terms of the space station mission, that was also launched by SpaceX, and our sort of implementation partner for that is actually Airbus US. So Airbus, as well as making aeroplanes, they also have a big space division, so they build quite a lot of satellites. and they have attached a platform on the International Space Station for hosting payloads like ours. So it's a sort of real estate business where they sell the space and they provide power and bandwidth from the space station. So payloads like us can be attached. There's other payloads there that are maybe, experiments, monitoring, measuring certain things in space, and our payload is live streaming video from there. So that in itself was quite a long job. Obviously, getting things onto the space station is quite difficult. You have to pass a lot of safety reviews with NASA because there's humans on board. So it's quite a long process to do that. But we are working on launching 2 more systems to the space station as well, with steerable cameras and other upgrades, and those should be much quicker. So it's probably what was a 3-year project, because it's repeat engineering and learning from some of the lessons that we have from this first mission. It means the whole process of knowing what's required to pass a safety review, knowing what tests are required to pass the safety review, is all known. So now we could probably deliver something like that in 6 to 12 months rather than 3 years.
So when you're going up? When you're going up, would you?
I'd love to go into orbit. I did back in 2009. I did purchase a ticket on Virgin Galactic, but first of all they sort of took a lot longer to get into space, and during that time I needed to fund the business, so I actually had to get a refund, get my money back to invest in the business. And then I secondly also decided that I don't really want to do a suborbital flight where you get sort of about 2 minutes in space. I wanted to, one day I'd love to go into orbit where takes about an hour and a half to actually orbit the whole Earth in a spacecraft. No one's offering that at the moment as a sort of space tourism service, but there are companies like Blue Origin, which is Jeff Bezos of Amazon, his space company is called Blue Origin. They're developing orbital flights for paying customers, right? And maybe SpaceX will as well one day.
Yeah, well, let's get Sen to the successful point where you can get that ticket again and actually experience it now. And I mean, look, in all honesty, I could spend the next half of this podcast talking about the fascination and the techie bit. And I know I've got the TEKEX techies screaming at me, going, ask him this. So hopefully you'll meet some of them tonight. But look, I think let's jump into some other points. I asked you like who your idols were, who these compasses, and Musk is in there, right? We've already sort of referenced that. I think you said Steve Jobs and Charlie Chaplin. Like what's the thread in those 3 characters that ties that respect of them together for you? Yeah, and your journey and your entrepreneurial journey.
I think the thread is that they all did something that hadn't been done before and faced challenges and have done amazing things. So obviously Elon Musk with SpaceX, when he started that, everyone said you can't create reusable rockets. It's impossible. So against all the odds, he sort of put the engineering team together and achieved that. And I think he's probably the greatest industrialist ever in terms of what he's done, not just with SpaceX, but also with Tesla and what he's doing with Neuralink and other industries. I mean, in history, there's some amazing entrepreneurs and business people who, just for creating one successful company, and he's working in several industries. I think Steve Jobs was an absolute visionary and genius. The products he created with Apple, also the work he did with Pixar, and he didn't start Pixar, but obviously he sort of drove that forward and bought that.
Also nailed the roll neck.
He did do that, exactly. Exactly. And one of his, and I liked his glasses as well. I sort of copied his glasses, which he had sort of glasses specially made. So sort of that inspired me to get some nice glasses made.
He bought tech cool, didn't he?
Yeah.
You probably didn't know it, but he sort of bought this. He managed to fuse nerdery and coolness, like via the brand as well. It's like pretty magic from a branding perspective as well. What he achieved, and then
with also with music as well. I think you had big companies like Sony. You know, when music went digital, you know, he was the one that nailed that in terms of with the iPod and making digital music, and of course now it's on phones and everything. But I think there's several industries that he touched in terms of through the smartphone and music and film. And yeah, Charlie Chaplin I named was just because...
Yeah, this is the outlier for me, but I'm intrigued.
I like his story. So he grew up in London, you know, in poverty, and under the age of 9, he was sort of in the workhouse, and just it was sort of a bit like Oliver Twist, and somehow it's the way he made it from there onto the stage, you know, almost by necessity to help pay the bills and help his mother out. And I think his mother had mental health issues, and he was sort of very much on his own. So managed to sort of make a name for himself on the stage, and then gets to America, and rocks up at some Hollywood studios, and then starts doing his thing, and gradually took control and started directing his films, and became the most famous person in the world by about the age of 30. So I just love that story.
It's a great story. It's almost like his style, you know, it's almost like an expression of his trauma or his, you know, lack of opportunity. You know, the way he expressed himself in a comedic movement way. I didn't know that about Charlie Chaplin. And, you know, there's something about that in the underdog story, right? We love an underdog story, man. There's something quite potent in that.
Yeah.
Especially when it's not like that story isn't played upon. You're just like, right, no, meritocracy is my game. This is where I'm gonna go.
Yeah, and I think also sort of related to the fact that he's created he didn't create silent film, but he sort of helped make the genre popular as a global form of entertainment. That's something that I'm trying to do with live video from space, because it hasn't existed before. So you face that challenge of, well, who's going to be interested in this, and why is anyone going to watch this? And you're creating this sort of new form of media, and he made that art form popular. And yeah, I think you would expect, well, if you didn't know about his backstory, you'd think, well, he must have been born in Los Angeles and must have sort of been connected and somehow knew people at the Hollywood studios. And it's just the fact that he came from where he came from and where he ended up. I just think I find it that inspirational as well, because I'm from York in north of England, and again, it's one of those people would expect live video from space, and people say, well, you've got to have come from NASA or somehow have come through Silicon Valley. So again, I try and take inspiration from, look, it doesn't matter where you've come from, if you have a dream and pursue it, and it just might be right, then hopefully you could make it.
Yeah. You know, and talking of genre defining, you know, is what you do art or science? Is it something else? You know, I'm being provocative in the binary nature of my question, but I'd love for you to explore both of those.
I think it's art. There are other satellites gathering scientific information, taking images with radar so they can see through cloud at night, or weather satellites that are gathering near infrared information so you can work out temperatures and you can work out gaseous emissions on the planet. And I think that's all really important and vital. But I think what we're sort of the sort of stage before that is, how do you get people interested in space? How do you get people understanding the importance of space and the benefits it delivers to people back on Earth, and getting the public on side for that whole journey of exploring space? And to get people excited and interested, you've got to tell that story. And even when you think about going back to the moon, which lots of governments and private companies are involved in getting people back to the moon. But again, that's a story that needs to be told to the wider public, because there's 8 billion people on the planet, and ultimately the only way these things will work is if they get, you know, the public support, which then supports, you know, the funding and exploration of these missions. So I'm trying to, even with our video, shows the fact that the planet is beautiful, but also we are obviously filming a lot of natural disasters as well. which are happening all the time. And I think raising awareness of that will make people hopefully think more about the environment. And then that will in itself lead to maybe governments investing more in science data, which can then help come up with solutions. But first and foremost, you've got to get, public interest and support for what you're trying to do. So that's where we stand. So I would say, I think of myself sometimes, maybe this is the Charlie Chaplin thing, I sometimes think of myself more of a film director than an entrepreneur, as in I'm trying to create this film basically, which is the story of all life on Earth, and once we go beyond Earth back to the Moon and Mars, and actually just telling that story for all people for all time, and creating this business that can just go on and tell that story as a media.
Yeah, and something could be art and science at the same time, right? So I think I'd like to move on to entrepreneurship, and our previous guest who's speaking tonight as well, Adrian, who you'll meet, we talked about his neurodiversity. And in my time of TEKEX, as I express, my deepest privilege is meeting founders, and there's something about the neural activity, the neural makeup, the neurochemistry, neurobiology of founders that tends to sit in that what we're sort of now openly discussing as neurodivergence. I'm intrigued to that trait. And I've got a stat here as well to lead on, because I know you're autistic.
Yeah.
Diagnosed autistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So people with ADHD are 500% more likely to be an entrepreneur. And we can now wear the badge of neurodiversity openly. It's a fascinating time. As I said in the previous podcast, maybe we're going too far into the universe, and maybe we'll normalize and find a stable place to have a relationship with it, let's say. But not really a question there, just entrepreneurialism, neurodiversity. I'd love to pull that thread and get your thoughts as a founder, autistic founder.
Yeah, well, I think I see neurodiversity as a superpower, really. I think a lot of entrepreneurs may be neurodiverse or on the autistic spectrum, and it is a spectrum. And I think it's probably wider than people think. But I think sometimes it gives you a focus or a way of thinking differently, and not accepting convention. And of course, as an entrepreneur, you have to have unwavering belief and determination, and face a lot of adversity in terms of people thinking that maybe you're wrong. And so you really have to have a real determination, I think, to and be crazy enough. And it's even like risk. Our friends that say your risk profile is just off the scale. And it's like, I don't even see it as risk. To me, it's like, well, this is happening. And I've always believed that. And I don't know where that belief comes from, but I think it's a lot of entrepreneurs have that belief of just, well, I can see it, and therefore I'm going to make it happen. And I think if you start out thinking, well, I don't think I've got much of a chance really, then you're probably not going to risk it, because you probably just don't quite have that belief that you can make it happen. Now, I'm not saying I've made it or anything yet, but I still have that belief that it will.
You've got cameras
happen.
In space, Charles.
Well, we're on
definitely
the way. Got a lot to do though, but
you've definitely made something. So,
yeah, but you're never satisfied though. That's the other thing, isn't it? You always think, right, this year we'll do this, and then you're always all the time moving on. It's like, right, I've got these cameras. I've got one live stream of Earth. It's like, well, I want 2, or then I want 5, I want 30 live stream. I want satellites in geostationary orbit. I want cameras around the moon, and if I could wave a wand, it would happen all tomorrow. But you have to be sort of patient. But I think with neurodiversity, mine's that. I mean, a lot of people of my generation, it wasn't sort of widely ever diagnosed or understood or thought of really. If you're just a little bit different, you're just regarded as a bit quirky or something like that, or a bit of a loner, or a bit of an oddball sometimes. But I think nowadays it's good that there's a lot more recognition of it. And it was actually my youngest son that was diagnosed at quite an early age. And then you start then learning about it as a parent and having diagnosis and talking to psychiatrists and psychologists and learning about it, then you start recognizing all the traits, which actually led me to get a diagnosis. But it was quite funny because when I
How old were you when you got diagnosed?
Like late mid-40s.
Right.
I'm early 50s now. But it's just, and then my wife said, well, you don't need to pay anyone to diagnose you. I can tell you that you are. And then, but it sort of like surprised me because you sort of think, well, I'm just who I am. You know, you don't need to sort of attach a label or anything. But then I think a lot of the traits that I think it does help to get a diagnosis sometimes, because then you think, I mean, there's just odd things like sensory things. Like I hate sort of sudden loud noises. So when a train goes through a station, I always cover my ears. And I'm always the only person on the platform that does that. And I used to think, well, I'm a bit odd. People think I'm a bit odd. But it's like, oh, no, I understand. Or I used to hate bright lights. I can't, certain sensory things. Or not liking eye contact and things like that. I think you either sort of like staring at people or you don't like eye contact. I can't look at you in the eyes. How can I have said that? But and there's just little things like that. And then you do end up, and I learned about masking. So then you have these things that you say, well, no, that's not, society says you should look people in the eyes and do this a certain way. So, you sort of get conditioned to just sort of think, well, I don't really like that, but I'll just go along with how I'm meant to behave. Mm. And I think having a diagnosis and society being a bit more open and accepting to neurodiversity now means, I feel a little bit more like, I can be more myself and be comfortable that,
I mean, look, I was doing some reading recently about, I think we're the only species with whites to our eyes. Mm. And that's an evolutionary thing, and it goes back to caveman. Whereas if you and I are talking here and there's something threatening you over your shoulder, the fact that you can see my eye move towards it is signaling to you that, look, we're in trouble here. And there's something I did this charity challenge recently where I had to walk loads as a challenge. And so a lot of my meetings were walking meetings where we're walking together, and you don't really look at each other when you're walking. And then I sort of was breaking down the dynamic of meetings in board meetings. There's something like quite innately confrontational of looking across each other, unless you're like quite close to the person. It can be uncomfortable, and it's quite like, this is my side and that's your side. And there was a really interesting dynamic when we started walking with people that just broke down some of the barriers. And so I don't think we're meant to have these sort of eye-to-eye intimate moments in some instances. But you look, from my perspective, and neurodiversity gives a different perspective. And like your business, you've overcome, all sorts of challenges to give us all a perspective of Earth. I mean, there's something wonderful in that story. So hats off. And
thank you.
Let's go for what's next in space tech in your view.
I think, we're seeing a lot of it develop with reusable rockets, with SpaceX and Blue Origin as well are working on that, which will lead to, and Starship, which will lead to launching a lot more mass into orbit for a lot lower cost. So that'll see more satellites into orbit. I think there's something like 8 or 10,000 satellites now. Quite a lot of them are Starlink. But that number's set to go to sort of potentially hundreds of thousands of satellites in the next decade. So a lot of them are companies like Starlink looking to do high-speed internet everywhere. So Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin are also working on a similar constellation to Starlink called Kuiper. And that's going to happen because he's got the funding to do it. And obviously Starlink is working. And then what that enables, that's, if you like, the communication, that enables people to get data back instantly and in real time. And that's something that's very important for us, that infrastructure, so we can get this video back in real time to people. But it'll also help other companies get data back. So it's just building the different layers. So we've got the launch vehicles, then the communications layer. And I think we're really focused just on the information layer, adding this real-time information about what's happening, not just on Earth, but eventually around the moon. what's also going in space tech, I think a lot more lunar activity over the next few years. There's obviously NASA have their Artemis program, they call it, to return humans to the moon. The Chinese are also planning to put humans on the moon. Not sure what the Russian space program is working on these days. But also then there's private companies planning to take people for a trip around the moon or to the moon. So I think that will really excite people going back to the moon. Obviously, with a whole new generation of people.
Did they really go there? I'm sure that will go on a conspiracy podcast somewhere. But yeah, no, I mean that's super exciting. A couple of final bits. We're going to get to the conclusion. I think I've seen some of the footage. You obviously have an intimate relationship with it. There is something so stunningly calming about watching planet Earth turn. In many ways it's therapeutic. There was something you said, I think, when we first met. It was about a statement one of the astronauts made when looking back at planet Earth, which, gives the sort of shivers down the spine moment. I mean, you spend a lot of time with this footage. There's a catharsism, a therapeutic nature to it. You said when sometimes when you sit with people, they just sort of get mesmerized, humbled, all these things. I don't know if you want to talk about that a bit. I mean, there's something magic in what you're enabling.
Well, thank you, and I hope so. I think there's been about 600 astronauts that have seen Earth from space with their own eyes, and obviously the number of people going to space will increase over the coming decades. But what we're trying to do is just give everyone access to a similar view as if you are looking out of the space station,
which is your democratization.
Which is exactly. Yeah. I think there's always going to be a freely. It's free to access, it's free to watch. And I think that I've just actually written something for space.com about the importance of looking at Earth from space in this way, like astronauts do. So, it can never be quite the same as seeing it for your own eyes. I think that sensory input that you get looking out of the window of a spaceship from what astronauts have said. And I've been to, lectures and things about how the darkness of space and things, you have to experience it through your own eyes. But I think it's a slightly different experience seeing video of Earth, but it's also can have the same emotional impact. And I think if you follow a sports team, it's great if you go to the stadium and watch a live football game. You get a different experience, a different emotion. But it doesn't mean if you watch a game on TV, you're any less emotionally excited or connected to that game, and you just see a slightly different perspective. You might see when you're at the game, you can't see the close-up views that the TV cameras give you. So actually, there's benefits of seeing it through TV as well. I think you need both ultimately, but I hope people like watching the content. I think it's people have said it's quite hypnotic. Even actually looking at clouds, because they're just different every second and every day, different formations, and they're never quite the same. And you just know that, right, if you watch that in an hour, the clouds will have moved and changed, and quite.
Yeah, there's something
calming
about the unnatural pace of technology that is, distracting us every moment of our life. That something about calmly looking at the planet that we all exist on. It's profound. We're going to be on stage soon, and I want to give you some time to get ready. But finally, all guests who come on the TEKEX stage, I have the pleasure of curating them. But there's a reason why we're putting you on stage as well. What's the ask tonight? Be it fundraise. Maybe you're looking for partners, and how the TEKEX community might be able to support.
Well, thank you for that question. Yes, we are fundraising. We're looking to raise up to £2 million, and that is sufficient to get us to profitability. We're focused on making this first live stream profitable, and then future capital raises would be for growth capital to expand and grow quicker. So we are always looking for investment. and we're looking just to get people excited by the story and share it and watch it. It's interesting that you talk about it being calming as well, because I think that is another potential application. So if anyone knows Michael Acton Smith and the Calm app, I'm sure they could, do a partnership with us to as an alternative to listening to rain or watching a log fire.
I think we should tag him, right?
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
So that's mainly the ask. I'm not trying to sell anything. The content is free. You can watch it now. You can watch it anytime. So please just support us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Sen, and you can also see it directly on sen.com as well. Follow us on social media and hopefully enjoy what we're doing. And if you'd like to invest in, be part of that journey as we head towards profitability and eventually an IPO, then please, that would be fantastic as well.
Charles, my deepest thanks. And I'm sure there's all sorts of things I could have asked and should have asked. And tonight, best of luck. You're going to meet lots of great Jersey people. We welcome you with open arms. And hope you come back for another trip and maybe another podcast where I ask you all the questions that the people are screaming at me I should have asked. But for now, that's a wrap. TEKEX 2. Really appreciate it, Charles.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Ed.